Happy Friday, my friends. My name is Tim. I'm the host of the All Out Coach podcast. Today, I want to share with you a very inspirational case study, a business case study that's going to really allow us to redefine how we measure goodwill. Something that is overlooked, overestimated, sometimes thought of being a you know a, a concept that is nice to have, but not always the bottom line in business. Well, goodwill can be measured, and it can be measured apparently even in accounting, is what I learned last week. That goodwill is defined as the price that somebody pays that exceeds the fair market value for your corporation when they're trying to acquire it, or even from clients that approach your company. So somebody that is generous, who pays more than the fair market value, is considered to practice goodwill. And therefore, the result of it is an asset or a benefit. Uh, so that's in accounting terms. Now, how do we take the goodwill that all of us are familiar with and quantify it into business results that we can touch, that we can feel? And that's really why I wanted to talk about this concept and this idea that I think can be inspirational, that can be very rare. And as we are all looking for some inspiration and for some goodwill today, regardless of what industry we're in. So I watched a TED Talk by James Rhee last week. He is the son of Korean immigrants who went to public school and had a chance to go to Harvard. In fact, he graduated from Harvard Law School. He was a high school teacher, a private uh, equity investor, a banker, a mathematician, and he went to work at Ashley Stewart. Ashley Stewart was a clothing company that primarily employed African American women. And so he had risen up in the ranks there, had become the chairman of the board, and had also saved the company, Ashley Stewart, from bankruptcy. Um, However, he decided at some point that he needed to work a little bit closer with his colleagues, be a little bit closer to the business. Uh, and the inspiration behind that came during a very tumultuous, difficult time when he reached back to his own childhood, his years when he was 5 years old, and he remembered his friend, one of his best friends in class in school, whose mom had passed away. So he had lost his mom, and he often wouldn't be able to even bring lunch to school. And James shared his lunch very often, just gave him his lunch so that his friend wouldn't be hungry. And so, as a matter of gratitude, as a token of gratitude, his friend's father came to school with his son, and in front of everyone, he gave him a gift of a red helicopter, which James actually brought to his TED Talk, to his presentation, because it symbolized that goodwill that would then pay him dividends, huge dividends later on, later years, decades later at Ashley Stewart. And so it was his duty, he felt, to serve the company, to help it turn around, turn its course. And when he first addressed his employees as the CEO, which he intended to only be for about 6 months, he told everyone, "Look, I'm probably one of the least qualified to be the CEO here. He didn't have necessarily the relevant experience, knowledge in the industry, in the field, but he decided to be authentic, and he told everyone that he was there to learn with them and to grow. So he visited all of the stores, many of the stores at Ashley Stewart, and he recalls just wondering how well and how warmly he was received by everyone, even because he didn't necessarily represent the employees, the general profile of the employees, nor of the clients himself. However, they showed him the problems they had. A lot of the warehouses had bugs. They were not even in, they were in horrible conditions. The inventory, the clothing, they were disorganized and struggling to keep above surface, to just keep their head above surface, really. But because of how he was received by his employees and colleagues, he was then also inspired to really turn the company around and to first focus on the culture. So the first step that he took in turning around Ashley Stewart was establishing a culture in which everyone on a daily routine made it a priority, made it a strategic priority to collaborate, to share diverse ideas, and to help each other. Once they established that culture, right? Once that the culture of goodwill was established, then he changed the policies of communication. So what he did was they started to implement a strategy in which they shared on a broad level with everyone their internal wins, their products, their strategies. And the way they did that was implementing a digital strategy, a low-cost digital strategy in which he, as a CEO, trusted his employees to share and to use their smartphones, various different digital channels, in order to let people know about Ashley Stewart, its products, its clothes, and a lot of the successes that they had internally. Okay, so that required new policies. And then thirdly, having already centered on goodwill and their internal marketing and PR methods, in which they really blurred the lines between we and they, right? So they collaborated more, with various different partners to help with that digital promotion. But the third was to center on really redefining metrics, performance metrics, and compensation, where they measured everything. They measured everything according to James Rhee, but they changed the definitions of how they measured what they reported. What are some of the examples? Well, number one, the payroll was no longer in the expense column. It was in the investment column. So think about what that does to the culture and of the organization. When you pay employees, it's no longer an expense. Your board of directors now considers it an investment. And again, investing in people is the biggest investment and the best investment you can make. Okay? That's mentorship. That's leadership. That's creating other leaders and passing the baton. And they employed that in their policies, in their accounting columns that they redefined. Secondly, in that third part of that strategy, James Rhee redefined how they worked together with their vendors, their third parties. So their third parties now invested capital. They were co-investors that into Ashley Stewart, meaning they owned some equity into the company. They didn't just perform services, but they were free to co-invest some capital uh, into the company, into Ashley Stewart. So ultimately, what that did was that turned around the company uh, gradually. But there was one event that they held at Ashley Stewart in 2013 in which they truly exercised goodwill as an entire organization for the first time. They went to homeless shelters and gave away clothes. He They didn't have many resources available at all as a company. Again, remember, they were near bankruptcy. Okay. But he realized that he needed to use goodwill and promote the company and what it stood for, its vision, in order to continue to go to afloat, right? So 40 of the 250 stores nationwide were then allowed to make donations as well. And they created this event, which they gave away some clothes, and that caught on to the point where every year they started to have that event. They began to give out an award called CEO Citizenship Award, in which an employee embodied the culture of goodwill, where they acted like an owner, they were a friend, they were a mentor to others. And slowly and gradually, the investment community became interested, became in Ashley Stewart, and they started to write checks of hundreds, on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars, as James Rhee recalls. And so, goodwill was redefined in accounting terms, but it was also that goodwill that he reached back to his own childhood in order to view it from the eyes of a 5-year-old, again, now as an adult, in order to quantify it and to deliver and to change what the bottom line was for the business. Because the bottom line for the business at Ashley Stewart was not just profits and loss and traditional accounting statements and reports, but it was the goodwill that happened to be that outcome that ultimately led to the company becoming a very widely renowned business management case study, where they had sold out concerts that they started to sponsor as a company with events called Finding Ashley Stewart. They went out into the community in order to find women entrepreneurs, women business leaders in various different communities, underserved populations as well. And so ultimately, that is the miracle that took place, at Ashley Stewart. And even though goodwill is maybe some abstract concept that you may not be able to touch, right? They measured everything. They actually redefined the formulas, mathematical formulas, and they combined math with kindness, as James Rhee mentions in his TED Talk. So let me know what comments you have here, but I'll share some of my thoughts as well here. On the social responsibility, on goodwill, in terms of the associations we have with it, right? Goodwill is generosity, it's intentions, right? It's often what we think about when we say somebody's has, look, they have the goodwill. We know that you have the goodwill, right? It's the intentions that you have, that are meant to serve the best interests of others, as well as being philanthropical, right? When we think of goodwill, we probably may think of Goodwill Games, Ted Turner, a billionaire, businessman, philanthropist, one of the most well-known philanthropists, in fact. But think of the Goodwill Games that started in the 1980s. They came during a time when Russia was boycotting American Olympics. The Americans had boycotted the 1980 Moscow Olympics as well, right? And there was some political upheaval, which I'm not going to get into. But back then, in the 1980s, invasions of Afghanistan and so forth. And in 1986, the intention there and the spirit of the Goodwill Games, which took place in 1986 for the first time, and had over 182 events and thousands of athletes from all over the world compete, is an example of an event or an idea, an abstract idea, right? That may be very, very aspirational, right? Or even philosophical, but it was the philosophy of goodwill that was needed at the time, similar to what we're experiencing today, right? In our business world, where now you have socially responsible corporations, corporate social responsibility policies, various different B Corp designations that businesses can form, responsible AI, responsible technology, responsible business now being at the forefront of a lot of the minds of the next generation leaders, right? And it's that inspiration, that goodwill that we're looking for now, that we're searching for so much. And in the context of business, I'll share also a case study of startup accelerators and nonprofits, how they defined what a nonprofit organization is. I spoke to Dave Knox, an award-winning brand builder, venture investor, best-selling author of the book called Predicting the Turn. And he had created a startup accelerator called the Brandery that ultimately transformed 85 different startup organizations and helped them grow and find investors, venture capitalists. But unlike other accelerators, what Dave Knox mentioned to me in my podcast interview, which you can see in All Out Coach, is that it was a non-profit organization. Okay, it was a non-profit startup accelerator. However, it wasn't a non-profit that relied on sponsorship funds in order to be sustainable. No, it was an entrepreneurial nonprofit, meaning the accelerator called the Brandery, the startup accelerator, was funded by had a fund that was investing its equity into every single startup that it trained to accelerate its growth. So it had its own sustainability, at stake, right? So in order to fund entrepreneurship, they needed to be entrepreneurial themselves, right? So that redefined what nonprofit was. And ultimately, what was the result of that initiative? Well, the result was that the state of Ohio and in Cincinnati, the government created an endowment that allocated funds for next generation entrepreneurs and startups. So it incentivized business and innovative businesses in the future in the city of Cincinnati that he's so passionate about. When you hear him speak, when you talk to Dave Knox, and when you listen to the interview on All Out Coach, I think you'll get that sense as well. And so nonprofit organizations, they personify that goodwill. But there's a way that you can quantify that goodwill into growth, into benefit for generations to come. And so this is an example, getting back to James Rhee and Ashley Stewart, of how goodwill, an idea that may be so aspirational, becomes a reality. That a philosophy, when you invest into a particular philosophy of goodwill, you redefine business as not being brutal, but as as viewing goodwill as a bottom line, because that's what allows people to continue to be engaged, to continue to be innovative, and to ultimately be productive and grow in order to be sustainable independently. So I hope that this case study is going to inspire you. A lot of those of you who may be struggling right now with your business, with your startup, with your projects, because another concept that I talk about is momentum, right? Goodwill can accelerate your momentum. And what is momentum? Well, the law of conservation of momentum states that during those unfortunate events or collisions or conflicts, when you're near bankruptcy, when you're having difficulty, right? The total momentum is always at zero. It stays at zero, meaning that momentum that may be gained by those people that may put you in those hardships or those unfortunate events are actually are lost. That momentum is lost, is gained by the people who are, or the employees or the subjects that are experiencing, that are on the receiving end of those events. So that momentum gained, the exact amount of the momentum gained in a collision by the object hitting another one, is actually gained by the receiving object, you. And so, just like it was the case of Ashley Stewart, those difficulties, that tumultuous period of time where they were near bankruptcy, right? They couldn't even keep up with their warehouses that were just, you know, uh, in horrible condition. They came out of it, right? They were able to persevere because of the momentum that they gained as a result, by changing their philosophies, right? On goodwill, on the culture that they rewarded. So I'm hoping that this will inspire you for the weekend ahead. Have a great Friday, my friends. Follow the All Out Coach podcast and YouTube channel. Let me know what your comments are, and ideas, and the projects you're working on now. Have a great day. Tim, all the best.